Okay, so I'm John Breeding, and it is Wednesday, March 4th, 2009 in Austin, Texas. And I want to talk today on the subject of control, and specifically psychology, psychiatry, and control in general, and then narrow it in towards current public policy in the United States. I guess it makes sense to start with the whole idea of science and the scientific method, and in general terms, it's called observe, describe what you observe, explain it, that's called theory, make predictions based on that theory in order to control reality. Observe, describe, explain, predict, control. That's science, and that's presumably neutral in theory. The dark side, however, of science is always power, because it never really gets separated out in terms of power dynamics in a society. That's obviously most powerfully illustrated probably by the use of the atomic bomb, right? The nuclear bombs today. Tom Zotz, our esteemed teacher about psychiatry and control, his famous analogy from the comparative study of the Inquisition and the mental health movement, classic book from 1974. The Inquisition is to heresy as psychiatry is to mental illness. The Inquisition used heresy as a way of controlling people in the society, killing those unwanted. Psychiatry uses mental illness as a justification to control and segregate and suppress people who show undesired behavior. Psychiatry is a mechanism of social control that operates outside of the criminal justice system, or not outside of its interface nowadays, but in principle, psychiatry can come in even where there's a law not broken in the sense of a legal statute, but there's some sort of implicit code of behavior that's considered unacceptable or undesirable. Or else behavior is used as an excuse to deal with somebody in a power conflict within a family or within an institution. The Inquisition is to heresy as psychiatry is to mental illness. It's about control. It always has been. That's why coerce and enforce are the base of psychiatry. Why drugs are used, because they suppress and control behavior. Electroshock on top of that. Involuntary commitment, involuntary outpatient commitment, you name it. It's about control. Kids in schools that are considered out of control, bring in the drugs, get them under control. That's the dynamic over and over and over again. The rhetoric is that it's about medicine, about illness. The reality is it's about control. I learned a little bit recently about a strong example of this control dynamic. Let's look at what's going on in the United Kingdom. Over the past decade, they spent trying to pass a certain law that allowed incarceration of people who hadn't committed a crime. That's called preventive detention. It's all part of the terrorist act kind of stuff. You know, they got this stalker unit, or also known as a risk assessment unit. So they can pick up people who might be a threat. They can get a doctor to testify that that person might be a threat, and they can take them up, incarcerate them, and basically they're disappeared. They don't even know where they send them. It's a mental health bill. Another law that they have is they can, for people after they've served a prison sentence, they require a psychiatric evaluation upon release from prison. And guess what? Based on that evaluation, they can be moved to dangerous and severe personality disorder unit. They're considered untreatable, but they can keep them in this place indefinitely. Of course, that's the same country that has more closed-circuit TVs than anybody anywhere. I think they have over 4 million. And nowadays they're even voice-activated. They'll even talk to you. Databases on kids' DNA. And there's all kinds of stuff going on, which reflect a police state kind of experience over there. They've got this thing called ASBOs, antisocial behavioral personality disorders, antisocial behavior disorders, ASBOs. The courts could order kids to be placed in that system. That one kind of fell apart because the kids basically rebelled and saw it as a badge of honor and just acted more, and they eventually dissolved that one, but that's the direction. They have a program called Sure Start where they give 1 to 5-year-olds happiness tests. So there's these mental health laws in Britain that support the basic police state dynamic. And if that sounds familiar to those of you who've listened to me before or paying attention to what's going on in this country, it should. I mean, just this week, the New York Times, came out with an article where the Obama administration had released several of these memos from the Bush administration, that were all based on policies regarding the war on terror. Electronic surveillance on our own citizens. Authorizing the use of the military domestically. In other words, our own military used on us. Of course, there's the policies of extraordinary rendition and, detention of those considered possibly terrorists without habeas corpus. There's the famous torture memos, all in the context of the War on Terror and the Patriot Act, of systematic dissolution of civil liberties, a systematic dissolution of the Fourth Amendment and of the First Amendment going on in this country, right? I mean, look at the trends in the prison system. I've heard this data just yesterday. Do you know what percentage of adults in the United States are involved in the criminal justice system, either in prison or on parole kind of thing? It's 1 out of 31. So 3 out of 100. Slightly more than 3 out of 100. Of course, if you're black, it's going to be way higher than that. In 1984, 25 years ago, it was 1 out of 77. Now it's 1 out of 31. Prison industry is, one of our most massive industries in this country. But my focus here is back to the mental health, quote, psychiatric laws and their use. And what we've been fighting for several years now is the whole push based on President Bush's New Freedom Commission, which really means No Freedom Commission, which really means New Intrusion Commission or initiative, which is the push for universal mental health screening in the United States, going through the schools and through other sources to screen everybody for mental illness. I've gone over the dangers of that in several videos and in my writings as well. But the idea is you look everywhere under the rhetoric of finding kids who need help. But given that there's already millions upon millions upon millions of kids getting help, which means getting poisoned by psychiatric drugs, once you take a close look, you realize, especially when you see that mental health screening doesn't work, it doesn't prevent suicide, it has all kinds of so-called false positives because the diagnoses are totally subjective. What it does work at is a marketing technique and recruitment technique. Finding more and more kids who are considered depressed or sad or ADHD or whatever, and then the major treatment, of course, since those are assumed to be biologically based mental illnesses, chemical imbalances, is drugs. Mental health screening is a really dangerous dynamic. Started with the New Freedom, Commission and recommendations, Texas Medication Algorithm Project, in which the drug companies basically got the state to create formularies requiring their high-profit patented drugs like Zyprexa and Paxil and, Risperdal and etc. to be the points on these algorithms to say that if you have this alleged mental illness, you got this drug. And the state was required to order them through Medicaid. The doctors required to follow that formulary. So millions and millions and billions of dollars in profits made from these things. Same people in the New Freedom Commission, the people who developed TMAP, and it's all the same energy that pushes mental health screening. You have to look through the rhetoric. And it's getting really, really heavy. We're challenging some of these things here in Texas. But at a federal level, in the first few days of this session, there's a dozen bills pushing various aspects of this agenda. It's unbelievable. I'm just going to mention two of them. I did a video on one a couple of weeks ago. One of them is called the Melanie Stokes Mothers Act. Mothers Act. It's for screening mothers, pregnant mothers, for signs of possible mental illness to protect the mothers and the children, right? Of course, Melanie Stokes had gotten all kinds of treatment. She'd been on several combinations of various drug cocktails, all of which had made her worse. Combinations of 3 or 4 different drugs to treat her alleged depression. And then on top of that, she was electroshocked. And then she killed herself. So this sad, tragic case, which best illustrates the destructive nature of psychiatric intervention, is used to justify more psychiatric intervention. This is a really dangerous act. It's in the U.S. Congress right now. Please do call your people up there, your senators and representatives, and tell them to stop this stuff. That's one example. I'm just going to give you one more right now. Education Begins at Home Act. This is not John Taylor Gatto's version of homeschooling. This is called Child Development Specialist Enter Homes with Parents of 0 to 5-year-old children. Specialists determine whether there are any hints of deficits or whatever, and screen the children for these types of problems. It's a mental health screening done at home with families with little bitty children to protect our country, I guess, to find mentally ill children and families, to effectively recruit and market the psychiatric interventions, which the trend, as we know, has been towards drugging more and more younger and younger kids. And it is bad news. This is current federal policy that's being pushed. It's a clear and present danger. Very severe danger. You start poisoning these kids at a very young age. Poison the mothers, and then of course the baby's poisoned in utero as well. And then it's born poisoned, and then you continue to poison them. And you have a lifelong product market for big pharma. It's really bad. And it's basically a control dynamic. Control the populace, suppress people, control of governmental policy and mental health policy, down translating to individual people and individual families, run by the people who control the government right now, which is the corporate elite that is out of control, with no ethics, going for maximum profit and minimum liability. And these vulnerable children and families are a big, expansive growth market right now. Don't buy the rhetoric. Don't buy the language. It's like Alice Miller's book about child abuse, that it's for your own good. Wake up. And let's stop this. Let's fight this police state kind of thing. Please.
There are over 350 videos on our channel, and I doubt you've seen them all. And the topics range from weight loss, nutrition, sexual health, all the way to psychology and mind control, and anywhere in between. And I think if you check them out, you're going to find some really interesting stuff.